Hello, everyone. My name is Deandra Coleman. I'm with the Virginia SBDC Network. For those of you that are not familiar with our organization, the Virginia SBDC is a partnership program between the U.S. Small Business Administration, George Mason University, and local host institutions throughout Virginia. With 27 locations across the Commonwealth, we provide training and technical assistance to small businesses in their local communities. Our one-on-one consulting services are available at no charge. Today's webinar, Cybersecurity Awareness Training for Your Business, is presented by the Virginia SBDC and is part of our cybersecurity series that discusses how to protect your small business's digital information. Before we get started, I want to mention a couple of housekeeping items. We are recording today's presentation and it will be posted on our website, virginiaspdc.org. Due to the large number of participants in today's webinar, everyone's microphone is muted. If you have questions during the presentation, you can type those into the Q&A box, and time allowing, our presenter will answer them at the end of the presentation. Today's presentation will be given by Tom Stamulis. Tom is the owner and managing director of True North Group. As a trusted partner of CTS Incorporated, True North Group provides and specializes in cybersecurity and cyber risk. They help businesses successfully navigate all areas of governance, risk, and compliance by providing services to assess risk, develop and enhance strategies, and design cost-effective solutions addressing cyber threats of both today and tomorrow. Tom has over 25 years of cybersecurity experience and began his career in the U.S. Army Signal Corps before transitioning to military intelligence as a counterintelligence agent with assignments in Germany, the U.S., and the Middle East. Tom has served his country honorably in both Operation Desert Shield, Desert Storm, and Operation Iraqi Freedom. Tom is certified as an information system security professional and information security manager, and is certified in risk and information systems control. And now I'll go ahead and turn it over to Tom.
All right, thank you, Deandra. Thank you, everybody, for taking time out of your day. If it's your lunch hour, I hope you have some food. We'll kind of make this a lunch and learn. What we're going to do is we'll go through the slides, and then I will leave some time at the end to ask questions. But throughout the presentation, if you have a question, please type it into the chat box, and we will do our best to get to them. If we don't answer it during the presentation, we will try to answer it at the end of the presentation. All right, so why don't we get started? And we'll go and share. All right. So today's presentation is going to be cybersecurity awareness and training for your businesses. Now, really for the employees that work in the business. Deandra, thank you for the introduction. This is just to let kind of people know a little bit about my background. I started my company a couple of years ago. Prior to that, my time had been with military and then also working with large firms that served enterprises and large companies, around the world. But when I left my firm and I decided to start my own company, I really wanted to focus on small and medium businesses because the risk to businesses is the same, but unfortunately, our small and medium businesses don't really have either the funding or the resources available to them that these large enterprises do have. So I thought it was a great mix for me to be able to start my own company, but also help our small and medium businesses, which make up a large portion of our communities. So today's agenda, we're going to cover a little bit about understanding the threat. Why is it important for us to have cybersecurity training and awareness? Why can we not just rely on tools? Why are humans very important to a business's successful, prevention program that they may put in place? And then we're going to dive a little bit deeper into viruses, malware, phishing, and then ransomware. So really, what is the threat? Now, if you look at the Verizon Data Breach Report, which is a report that I've referred to a number of times, what they do is they take a collection of information from people and from organizations, and they compile it, and really it allows them to put together what the trending is. So, and what we have here is, phishing and social engineering. We know this. We know that, this is a big issue for us. And if you look, 22% or almost 1/4 of all breaches involved some type of phishing or social engineering, which means that they took advantage of untrained or unknowledgeable employees to either deliver some type of malware or virus, or to extract some type of credential or information from the individual. And that only occurs when the employees don't fully understand what they need to do or how to deal with these awkward situations. Because in social engineering, they'll use the tactics of being nice, acting like they just made a mistake, all the way up to where they will use threatening language. And what they're playing on is the humans, or a human's desire to help or be helpful. And then also they play on the fact that a lot of humans don't like confrontation. So instead of dealing with the confrontation, they will just give that information. And as you can see, it's still very successful. I mean, our goal should be to get phishing and social engineering down to the single digits, because that would mean that not only are the tools that we have effective, but also the training that we do. Hacking was also one of the largest ones there. It was used in 45% of the breaches, and 80% of those breaches were used to lost or stolen credentials. So, understanding not to give up your password or to share your password is another aspect of training. Human error and misuse. Another thing that we talked about is that, these technologies that we use are configured by humans. And if they're not configured correctly, they're not going to operate effectively. And we're still at 22% of our breaches were caused by some type of human failure, where something wasn't configured correctly, or individuals were sending out information inadvertently because they weren't either properly trained, or they didn't understand what the information that was being done. Internal threats is where 30% of our data breaches were from internal threats, which means those were employees, individuals that were already in the company. They could have been disgruntled, unhappy, maybe passed over for promotion. So it could be an individual that you work with that could potentially pass this information. So in order to do this training, we have to be aware of what we are allowed to do and what we are not allowed to do. And if we see an employee doing something that we know not to be allowed, that we have the right information on how to report that. And then we have ransomware, Trojans, and other malware. We'll talk about that. That's still making up 17%, and 27% is ransomware. Now, both malware and ransomware, almost every single time, is delivered through some type of email. So phishing, which we're going to spend a little more time on, is really an important thing to understand, to be able to identify and be able to know what to do with it. If you suspect that an email that you're getting is actually a phishing email. Now, some of the things that small and medium businesses have been slow to agree, adapt, recognize that the threat. A lot of myths, and we've talked about them in the past, is that a lot of small and medium businesses don't think that they would be subject to some type of attack or breach. But the numbers clearly prove otherwise. And 28% or 30% of the breaches involved some type of small business. And if you look at the fact that 60%, are really, it's like they don't know what they don't know, and they don't want to know what they don't know, because a good owner or a good leader, once they're aware of a problem, it's inherent in their leadership style to address the problem. So it's kind of it's a gray area where if they don't know, or if they don't actually know what the problem is, then they can kind of avoid it. That's really not a good approach, because the threat is not getting less. The threat is actually getting more. And the more reliant that we are on technology, the it's good, the more susceptible we are to some type of breach. And then COVID really kind of, made a lot of businesses pivot. So, last March, we saw things being built up, and then, one day you're in the office, and then the next day you're being told to go home. And businesses are then deciding at that very moment, can we stay open? And if we do, how do we do it? And a lot of them weren't prepared. They weren't prepared equipment-wise or policy-wise. So basically, they just told people to pick up their desktops, go home, connect to the internet, and they figured out a way to give them access to the network and the data that they needed. But they really didn't have a plan, and a lot of these plans didn't have any security parameters in place, which put all of those businesses at risk. And as you can see, 43% of them, they don't even have a plan. They know what the risk is, but they just either don't have the expertise, don't have the time, have other competing priorities that they think are more important than protecting that data or that digital assets. So now we're going to get into a little bit about, what are the things that we hear about on the news all the time. And, the first one, it's been around for a very long time, which is a virus. But viruses have morphed into more than just a virus. And the reason they call them viruses is because just like a biological virus, the computer virus is designed to, once it infects a host or an endpoint or desktop, it is designed to spread from there and infect other devices. And those viruses initially were used by what we would call, script kiddies. They would get these things and they would infect computers to do random things, and it was more just to see if they could be done. But cyber criminals understood the value of a virus and understood that it was a gateway into a network, which would allow them to perform financial crimes. And really, that's a large majority, or most breaches are financially motivated. So regardless of whether you're a Fortune 500 company or whether you're a small business with 15 employees, if you have financial value, then you're going to potentially be a target. Now, if you think about it, these larger Fortune 100s have the resources, have the staff, have the capabilities, and they're a much harder target. And you got to look at as our small businesses as a softer target. Now, maybe the reward isn't going to be as big, but the time it takes to exploit a small business is far quicker than it would be. And most likely, they're less likely to be detected, which means that whatever tactic they use can be used multiple times. Now, malware, or malicious software, as it's a short titled, like I said, it's an umbrella term, and it covers things like spyware, Trojans, ransomware, adware, all of those things that collect data or extract data from our browsing to unauthorized individuals. And, our large Norton, McAfee, Avast, Kaspersky, they constantly are looking for new malware and new variants of malware and viruses so that they can update their antivirus software to help protect against that. Also, firewall providers, firewalls that are built into your operating systems do the same thing. And then your routers are getting more intelligent. Commercial firewalls come with packages that have that. So basically, there's layers of these defenses that will, if one doesn't catch it, it's hopefully the other one will catch it. Now, some of the things that you can do and business owners can do is, first of all, purchase legitimate software. There was a time where there was a lot of downloading of illegal software. Microsoft was a big deal, operating systems, Office. There would be keys all over the place, and people would go to very shady locations to download this free software. There was a lot of other free software. So basically, if it was considered expensive software, people would find a way to copy it, share it. But a lot of these sites also will infect this free software that you can download through a BitTorrent or something like that with some type of virus or malware, so that once it's loaded, they'll be able to access your system remotely. Also, keeping it up to date. Now, some people are very good at updating their operating systems. A majority of us are not. And Microsoft and Apple, they understand that. And they understand that to the point where you can go into your updates and set it up to where it'll automatically update for you. Now, I would recommend that for probably 80% to 90% of all small business owners. There is a few industries that because they're using maybe some legacy type software, and I know the insurance industry is one that I deal with, where they use an older version or a software version that is proprietary to a vendor, and the vendor may not update that software as quickly as Microsoft or Apple update their operating systems, and sometimes it can break that software. So if you're in a situation like that, or maybe a medical industry or the insurance industry, you would know what you're using. But if you're just using the operating systems, natively to do your QuickBooks and, run your website and do your e-commerce and things like that, set it up that all of your laptops and all of your desktops just update automatically. So as it gets updated, it will automatically upload it, and maybe the next day you'll get a notification that you need to reboot your system to install the remainder of that. That's one less thing that you have to think about, but it's a very good way to protect yourself against viruses and malware. Another one, which we'll talk about, is, don't click on open attachments from email addresses you don't know. If you didn't ask for it, most likely you need to delete it. Okay. And I also have a thing that if it's really that important, they'll email you back. Now, that's a conversation for you and your bosses. But, if you're not sure where it came from, then you've got to make sure that you don't click on an attachment, or you don't click on a link that could potentially take you to, the wrong place, or actually download something onto your computer that you don't want. Sometimes, you'll click on a link which is legitimate, or you'll type in a website and it'll redirect you someplace else to another site. You've got to be cautious about that. They're not always bad, but you want to make sure that if you're going to a site of a company, that when it goes to the other site, that it's still that company, and that it's not some unknown URL in the address tab that you don't understand. Because if you do, back out of it, delete it, or whatever, or close out that thing and start up again, and make sure that it goes where you need to go, or contact the person and say, is this supposed to happen? It takes a couple extra seconds to do that, but it's much safer than being directed someplace where you could potentially be infected with some type of virus. Using a pop-up blocker running on your web browser. Now, what's nice about this is Safari, Edge, and Chrome do this natively. They natively will block the pop-up blocker, and you'll usually, even if you go to a legitimate site, it will tell you that you're using a pop-up blocker, that you need to disable it for that site, so that you can either get the additional document that they need you to look at or something like that. But definitely run pop-up blockers all the time. It's just another thing that works in the background to protect you. Using a reputable antivirus. There are free and paid for versions. They're all reputable. You just got to make sure you do a little research. The big ones, like the Zervast, Kaspersky, Norton, McAfee, then there are also ones that are built in. There's Windows Defender, which comes natively that you can use. So there's definitely there, and there's a lot of them that, depending on your budget, and I think I've spoken about this in the past, a lot of the larger, more, I won't say more reputable, but the larger companies are now packaging not only their antivirus, but they're packaging password managers, they're packaging a VPN, they're packaging online protected storage. So when you look at the costs, if these are features that you could use in your company with your employees, it might be better to go with one of those paid for packages as opposed to searching the internet trying to find free versions, because with free versions, there are always features that you don't get with the paid versions. And then I've said this over and over again, you've got to back up your important files, all right? If you don't back up your files, don't waste your time doing anything else. And people can argue with me on that, but why would you bother? If you can't do the first thing, which is the most important thing, why would you do the rest of the things? So backing up those important files to an external drive, and we've talked about the using the 3-2-1 methodology. You want multiple copies of your storage. You want some offsite. You want it encrypted. You want to make sure you do that. Now, defending against malware, sorry. Okay, so what we're going to do now, so that covers viruses and malware. Now, we talked about phishing, and a lot of people think they know what phishing is. A lot of news agencies believe they know what phishing is. A lot of it depends on who's doing the research and what, and I'm putting in quotes, expert they talk to about phishing. And you got to be not wary of it, but you got to know where the source is coming from. There's a lot of experts that are on that are spoken to, but they are with companies that specifically sell solutions to phishing. So they're going to try to guide you in that direction. I don't. This is really information, and this is to help both the business owners and the employees to understand what it is, how it's conducted, and what we can do to prevent clicking on a phishing email. So, the term phishing, as you can see, started in 1996 by a hacker that was stealing AOL accounts and passwords. Why they chose PH, I don't know. But what it is when someone uses a message, a fraudulent message that could be from an unknown source, or if you've heard the term spear phishing, from a legitimate source. So it could even be coming from another employee to you, and they are getting much better at making these fraudulent emails look legitimate. So the way it's conducted, like I said, it's mostly through emails and texts. I'm sure everyone's gotten phishing texts. You're like, what is this? You just delete it. Same thing with emails. Fortunately, if you use something like a Gmail, Gmail does a very good job of filtering out spam. They do catch, legitimate ones at times, but they've done a very good job over the years with their algorithms to actually catch a lot of these spam or phishing emails. And as I said, it can come from a trusted individual. So it could be a vendor or a client or even a fellow employee that could be sending these fraudulent emails. And that's why it's really important to understand, how to detect these. So if you look at how phishing occurs, there's a couple ways. There are on the dark web. When a breach occurs and somebody steals data, they usually stealing emails and passwords and any other type of personal identification or personal identifiable information. And they sell these lists on the dark web, and individuals buy these, and then they build their campaign. So it's almost, just think of it like an illegal constant contact. where they put this campaign together, they have these emails, and they start sending out fraudulent emails to specific individuals or to companies. And what can happen is, the way this works here is, if you're security trained and you understand it, you either know to forward it to your security or your IT department, or some companies have a combination of security training and software where you can click on a button that says, suspected phishing, and then that goes into a container that can be evaluated. And if it's identified as phishing, what's really nice about that with some of this software is that if it's flagged as phishing, it'll actually pull the emails out of everyone's email box, or it'll block it if it hasn't actually been downloaded from the email server. On the opposite side, if an individual does click on it because they're not aware of what to look for, or they just made a mistake or whatever, definitely, the credentials are exposed, as well as certain types of malware could be installed on the systems, which ultimately would give a pathway into that business. And then from there, the attacker can then determine where they want to go, what they want to install, what they want to extract from that point. So how can you identify a phishing email? Because, even though our training is getting better and our technology is getting better, the phishing emails are getting better as well. And, so like I said, before it was from an unknown sender. They got smart to that because we got smart to that. And then they started being able to send it from legitimate senders. Some of the key things are, if you hover over and what hovering is if you have a link in there, or and you hover over it, it will pull up what the address is. So if you have something from Bank of America and you hover over the link that says, please click here, and it goes to, badguy.com, well, then you can reasonably assume that email is not from Bank of America. Also, if you have an unrelated attachment, where if someone sends you an email and it says, responding, with the quote that you asked for, but it's, x101.pdf, you have to ask yourself, is that, if it's coming from a vendor that you're used to doing business with, that's probably not the naming scheme that they use for the quotes that you've used in the past. Once again, it's a sign that it could be a phishing email that you don't want to click on. Also, if you didn't ask for it, that's where you get these unusual, unexpected subjects. If you didn't ask for it, or it doesn't relate to a site that you've done business with, or even a forum that you've been part of, get rid of it. Business-wise, if you're getting emails after what would be considered normal business hours, now some companies don't have normal business hours because they get emails all the time, but there are many businesses who don't have clients interacting with them outside of business hours. So depending on your industry, depending on your business, if you're getting emails outside of your normal business hours, something to look for. And then the last one here, of course, is poor English and poor grammar. If you see misspellings, you see a poor use of grammar, and it's a business-related email, you can reasonably assume that that is a phishing email, and you can delete it. And once again, like I said, if it's important, they'll email you back. So some of the things, now this is from a company called KnowBe4, and KnowBe4 is a company that specializes in security awareness. They have tools, but they also offer a lot of free guidance and free advice. And this kind of summarizes what we were talking about, where things that they consider to be a red flag. And we talked about who it's from, who's it to, the hyperlinks that we talked about, what's the date? Is it unusual? What's the subject? Is it something that you were asking about? Or is it something completely random that you weren't ever, and you also know you shouldn't be getting an email like that in your work email. Maybe you get it from your home email, but if you're getting it your work email, maybe that's another red flag. Attachments, if they're not identified correctly, you definitely want to look at that. And then what's the content? Does it match the subject? Does it sound like something that would come, like this is from Bank of America or whatever? Would you expect that to be that way? If it's from a legitimate user in your organization, does it go outside of what you've been trained? And when you think about spear phishing, a lot of times they'll try to take advantage of the time and the individual. So you might get an email from the CEO that says, I need you to pay this vendor. I need it wired by 4 p.m. to this account. If that doesn't feel right because it's never happened, I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that if you raise this to your leadership or even call the CEO or the boss of the company and ask them, most bosses are going to appreciate the fact that you're checking in before you just did it. Because once you wire $1,000 or $10,000 or more, it's going to be very difficult to get that back. Because a lot of times they'll do it at the end of the week, right before the normal business hours end. And sometimes it's not detected as being fraudulent till that Monday. And by that time, it's almost impossible to get that money back. So it's better to, if it's not something that you were trained to do or have been told to do or you understand as part of your policy, then it's a good idea to even get a second employee to, just run the sanity check on that and say, geez, this just doesn't sound right. What do you think I should do? It's far better than to do it, to question it than to do it. So we're going to go over a couple of phishing emails just to kind of, reinforce what we talked about. All right. First one here, if you don't have an American Express business account, then you probably don't need to read any further than that. If you do, you want to look for things like we talked about. You want to hover over that link. If it doesn't go where it's supposed to go, it's a phishing email and you want to delete it. Another one here, if you look at, the email here, this email, appears to be fishy if you're not getting that for an ACH transfer, right? Which is a financial transfer. And then if you look, you'll see that the email is out of the UK, but the address, all right, pulls up multiple sites. It has the address in Herndon, Virginia. So why are you using a UK email address if you have a US-based company? Definitely something to be curious about. And then if you look at the report, right, there's no context to the report. It's just a bunch of numbers. I wouldn't click on it, and I would recommend you don't click on it either. And then another thing here is, if you are at this company, you might know that this email doesn't exist. And then if you reach out to the IT department before you do anything and your IT department confirms that nothing's about to expire, which, like I said, if you're like, geez, I don't recall my webmail account needing expiring, call IT and they'll tell you whether it's fraudulent or not. And then you can forward it to them so that they can do what they can do to protect others. Another one, if you don't do business with AT&T or you don't use DocuSign, or you don't have a DocuSign account, then most likely it's a flag that you need to be aware of. Again, hovering is one of the best ways to do it. And then if you have different emails in a document, because you're getting ATT, you get service@DocuSign.com, or DocuSign.net, these are things, once again, so it just takes a few seconds to look at it if you don't feel it's right. One more. You can do Google searches for like an area code for 384. And if the area code doesn't exist, well, then it's a fraudulent. And if it's a mistake, then so be it. They'll send it again. And then we'll go in here. So some of the things that we talked about to prevent, security education is the best prevention for phishing. Know what to look for. Know, what's a red flag. If you're not comfortable with it, report it. And because it'll work in conjunction with whatever technology you may have. If you don't have anti-phishing technology, then you have to rely on your employees. So that's where even it's more important to make sure that all of your employees understand what to look for. And like I've said before, it can't be a 30-minute video once a year. It needs to be consistent. It could be once a quarter. It could be if your company publishes a newsletter, putting it in the newsletter to remind people. It could be posters. It could be emails that are sent out by the IT department about key things to look for. There's a lot of ways that are no cost or extremely low cost. And organizations like the Small Business Association, local chambers, there are in a lot of these companies that do provide free, they'll provide you with images so that you can add to your newsletters. They'll provide you with posters that you can print up and put in your break rooms or in the common areas of your business, just to kind of constantly remind people of what to look for when they're dealing with their email. Be mindful of what your organization posts online. Anything and everything is a tool for a determined hacker. And the thing to keep in mind is that most companies have rules on what can be posted on behalf of the company and who can post it. So if you're not authorized to post on behalf of your company, don't, because that's just going to get you in trouble anyway. If you see something suspicious, look it up. Takes only a few seconds to do a Google search for some things. Make sure that your personal browser and your emails are configured, ad blockers, and that you're using the most up-to-date browser that you can use. If you're several iterations out of updates, then that browser is going to be subject to some type of fraudulent email, malware, whatever. Multi-factor authentication, that's really where if you feel or if the credentials potentially are stolen, even if your password and your username are stolen in a breach, they're not going to be able to get access without that second authentication. So if you are using sites that provide it for free, then leverage it. PayPal, Google, a lot of them all use that ability to have a second factor authentication. And it usually is just a text to your phone with a 6-digit code. It only goes to your phone. So definitely take advantage of that. Updating your software and your hardware. I know it gets repetitive, but you'd be surprised how many people aren't doing it. And then once again, automate your data backup. You want that backup to be done if you're using like a Mac operating system. Time Machine does it for you automatically. You can also set it up with your operating Windows, can set it up to do automatically. You can move things to the cloud. There's really no excuse not to back up. So I want to spend a little time on ransomware because ransomware has become extremely prevalent, and it's one of those things that it's not a nuisance. A virus can be a nuisance. Spyware can be a nuisance. Ransomware can be a business killer. And I'm not really over dramatizing because if you are hit with ransomware, which is it's a form of malware that gets onto your network, and then the criminal encrypts all of your data. So when you come into work on the next day and you turn on your computer, you're going to get a window that says, we've encrypted all of your data. If you want it back, it's going to cost you X dollars. You have X amount of time to pay us those dollars, and it's always in Bitcoin. So, which means it's going to be completely untraceable. They're not going to take a check and they're not asking for cash. It's always going to be in Bitcoin or some type of digital currency so that it can't be tracked. They're going to tell you to do it. At that point, what do you do? Now, if you have cybersecurity insurance, it'll help you with some type of restoration, but it doesn't solve the problem that you cannot do your job today and your employees cannot do their job today. So if you're a medical office, that means you can't see patients. Dental, can't see patients. If you are a financial advisor, you can't see any of your clients. And you have to wonder if they got access to your clients' most important data. If you're a regulated industry, and this data is stolen, now you could be subject to fines, all of which could potentially, and most likely, I don't want to say most likely, 60% of the time, if a small business is hit with some type of malware, they go out of business within 6 months. The odds are not in your favor. So that's why it's extremely important to do what we can to prevent ransomware. Oh my gosh, let me get back here. I gotta go back. Give me 1 second. Sorry about that. All right. So what can you do defending against ransomware? First thing is backing up your data again. But this is even more important because if you can back up your data, all right, and that would be preferably to the cloud or to an external hard drive that is not connected to your network or requires multiple factors of authentication to get to, then you have a choice. And what that choice is you have a choice to either pay the ransomware or not pay the ransomware. And if you don't pay the ransomware and you have a full set of backups and they have been tested and you know they're working and they're not, you can basically not pay the ransomware. Now, it does not mitigate the risk of being infected with ransomware, but it does provide you the option of not paying it and then restoring your entire network from your backup. So basically your entire network would get completely wiped and restored from that full backup. And that is why you want to back up. And you want to make sure that it, like I said, we have our backups that are local, and we always do that. But then we also talk about the offsite storage. And if you offsited it and the criminal cannot access that backup because it uses multiple authentication measures to get into that or to access it or retrieve it, then you have what we would say a pristine set of your data. And therefore, you can say, thank you very much, we're not interested, and then just disconnect your network, and your IT team or an IT professional or a cyber professional can come in and help you restore that. So that's why it's very important that you secure your backups and make sure that they're not accessible for any types of modification or deletion from the network that was now infected or where that data currently resides. Using security software and keeping it up to date. All right, we've talked about that a number of times. Using antivirus, anti-malware, using a firewall, using layers of antivirus and malware protection, so that if it gets past one layer, then it hopefully will get captured by the other. Keeping your software up to date, we've already talked about that. It's very simple. You don't have to do it. You can set it to automate. And those are all things that help prevent being exploited by malware. Safe surfing, that's what we talked about with phishing. Know what a phishing email is. Know what to do if you come across a phishing email. And then, and what not to do, how to report it. Only use secure networks, all right? I think I've beat this one into everybody who's ever been with me for any amount of time on these Facebook Lives. Do not surf on open Wi-Fi, ever. On your personal network, on your personal device, or definitely not on your business device, okay? I cannot reiterate that enough. Open Wi-Fi is dangerous. And I don't care if it's Starbucks, and I don't care where it is. All right. I tell people that you should have a VPN. You should use a VPN whenever you are not on your personal network or whenever you're not on your business network. All right. Those are the only two things that you can reasonably assure yourself are secure. Other than that, now, okay, fine. If you want to go to your mother's house, all right, and you're the one that set up the network, all right, don't take me too literally, but if you are on an unknown network, you should not be doing anything of value. And what I mean by that is you're not checking your bank account. You're not paying your credit cards. You just, without doing a VPN, you don't do it. If you're a business owner, you should not let anyone connect to your network without using a VPN. It's probably one of the least expensive things that you can do. If you have a commercial firewall and you talk to your IT provider or your IT person, all commercial firewalls come with VPN licenses or the ability to purchase more licenses. And then everything that your employees do, as soon as they connect and they open up that VPN, all of their traffic is going to be protected, and they're not going to be subject to being intercepted on some type of open network. So the other thing is, if you're on your phone, remember, our phones were created for convenience, not necessarily for security. If you are on your phone and you're using your cellular technology to do your business, that is a very secure, protected network that Verizon, AT&T, T-Mobile, Sprint, whatever, they're all secure, and you can rely on them. You don't necessarily need a VPN. What happens though, is if you've ever connected to Starbucks or some type of open Wi-Fi in the past, your phone, if you have the settings in there and they're not set correctly, your phone will automatically connect to the Wi-Fi out of convenience and in speed capabilities. So you might start doing financial transactions on your phone thinking that you're on your Verizon network when you're actually on the Starbucks network. So you've got to make sure that you go into your phone and you tell it, don't, or ask me before connecting to a Wi-Fi. And that way you can say no if you're at an open Wi-Fi, or you can say yes when you're in your own personal home. But if you don't do that, a lot of times the phones will automatically connect and you'll be doing important business or personal over that open network because of the fact that your phone did it for you. And then lastly, just staying informed of what are the threats. You don't need to go read security forums. You don't need to do, but what you want to do is, as a business owner, you want to have some feeds coming into you about keeping you up to date. Now, a lot of times you can get them from your insurance companies. A lot of insurance companies, even if you don't have cyber insurance, will send out newsletters to tell you what the latest threats are. AAA does it. For seniors, AARP. I mean, pretty much everybody publishes an article at some point to keep their members aware. The VFW, the American Legion for veterans. If you're in an industry, if you get industry magazines, there's always something in there. Take a few minutes to read that so that you can understand what is current and what could potentially impact your industry. So lastly, these are some of the resources that I've used to help build this presentation, where I got the information. These are some good ones. These will be provided to you because the slide presentation will be provided to everybody. But right now, I would like to take a few minutes and see if we could answer any questions. So Amanda or Deandra, if you guys want to ask some of the questions, we can move through them.
Yeah, absolutely. We've got some questions. So I'll start off with the first one here. For a cloud-based SaaS company, what type of cyber attacks should we anticipate, and what safeguards should we put in place?
So I'm not really sure if the question is if you are a cloud-based SaaS company or if you're using a cloud-based SaaS company. So I'm going to answer the one where if you're using. So if you're using something like AWS, you have to understand where Amazon's security ends, where Amazon's security responsibility ends and where yours starts. And it's going to be different for every customer. The larger the customer, they're going to have more features provided by Amazon. The smaller the customer, you're going to be responsible. They're providing you the platform, but you're going to be responsible for protecting that platform and whatever data you put on that platform.
And they actually have a second part to their question. What guidance do you have for developers and technical folks versus everybody else? if you have any?
For developers, you should be using a secure container for your code. All right. And it needs to be checked in and it needs to be checked out. And you need to be running code checking software and security code checking software as you're building that out, because you want to catch those, any vulnerabilities or issues, you want to catch those before you go into QA testing, or even production, because it's much easier to fix the flaw or the issue before you go to production than trying to fix it after it's out there. Now, I know there are some companies that are like, let's get it to market and we'll fix it later. I can't speak for those companies, but as a developer, you definitely want to do whatever you can to identify and fix those flaws. But the big thing is using a secure container to check it in and check it out so that you know who's accessing it and who's making the changes.
Are there tools to detect ransomware on a computer or smartphone and clear them? And how effective are they?
Yes, there are tools that can decrypt the ransomware. I just say buyer beware. I would say that it's better to prevent the ransomware than to try to fix it. And that's just because, every company's going to tell you they can do it. But you're only going to have a limited amount of time to determine whether you're going to pay that ransom or not. And, I'm not going to, let's just say we have a really large school system in Virginia that was hit with ransomware and did that. And they, as large as they are, and with the funding that they have, had a very difficult time trying to resolve that. So if you're a small company, I would spend my time on prevention. And a lot of times, even if you have cyber insurance, I don't know if the cyber insurance would pay for software that might not be 100% proven. They'd probably pay you the money to do restoration from a secured backup over trying to decrypt that ransomware. And for prevention, it's, all of the major antivirus companies try to protect that. And I also talked about the firewalls. And then if you can teach your staff along with the technology to not click on it, then you're going to be far more apt to prevent a ransomware than to try to resolve it ransomware.
Most cloud repositories like AWS S3 automatically scan for viruses, malware, or ransomware. If so, So if we download a document that is sitting on a Google Drive or AWS S3, are they safe?
AWS yes, they do a decent job, but you've got to make sure that the settings are scanning it. So how do you know it was scanned? Just because they say they have the capability to scan it doesn't necessarily it is scanned. And I'm just saying that whoever sets up that container needs to make sure that those settings are properly checked and configured, which goes back to, we talked about one of the biggest problems with our cybersecurity training awareness is improperly configured devices and improperly configured cloud storage. So I would say that yes, it is safe as long as your either you or your IT department properly configured that container to scan for it. I can't tell you that it's always automatic. I would want to make sure that you check that before you assume that it's safe.
Where can I go to find state and local regulations that govern small business requirements for cybersecurity and privacy protection liability?
Right. So the first place I would start would be the Small Business Association, or the SBA. They actually have several sections that deal with specifically for small businesses in industries. So each state has breach reporting requirements. Each industry has breach reporting requirements, I would start at the SBA there and then go into the small business section, and they have multiple links where they can tell you what your requirements are. And then if you can't find it, reach out to the SBDC, your local SBDC, and then we can, if you can't find it there, then we can help you find additional links if you can't find it at the SBA site.
All right, and let's see. Should we disable SSID broadcasting on our routers?
I hate to sound like a consultant, but I would say it depends on the fact of where you are, how, I live in the country. I'm the only SSID, so there's really no sense for me to disable it. But if you're in a very congested area, it is for the average user, it would be a deterrent. But for a criminal, it's not a deterrent, because there are very simple tools that we use where we can find SSIDs that are hidden or broadcast. So my recommendation is if you're going to, you can disable it if you want to, but it becomes an inconvenience if you have people that try to use it that are not regular, like guests. So I would recommend that you have a good password, a very strong password, and that you use the best encryption available provided by your access point or your router.
Do you have mobile device security platforms that you can recommend?
Mobile device. I don't know when they say mobile device security platforms, I'm not sure if they mean like a mobile device management system that, for people who are using like bring your own devices and they want to build containers. And I hate to say it, but I don't recommend anything because I like to be technology agnostic, where I can provide several reputable companies, but I leave it up to the individual or the company to determine what's the best product based off of their money, or I'm sorry, their budget, their IT experience, and what capabilities. Because there are all very good companies out there. It's just that you have to determine what's best for you. Now, I don't use a mobile device management for myself. But if I did, then I would tell you what I use and why I used it. And I've done that with password managers. There are many, many great password managers. The one that worked best for me was 1Password. So I wouldn't tell you I would recommend it. I would tell you that I use it because it met my requirements. But there are many other ones that are available, and you have to determine which one's the best one for your organization.
Kind of along the similar lines of recommendation, do you have any recommendations for a good free training program online for developers and users?
Yes. So the SANS Institute is an organization that has been around for a number of years. They started training, and they actually have a free set, an entire program that they give away for security awareness training. KnowBe4 is another great company that has a for pay, but also provides a number of free services and free free videos and free training. So I would start with those two, definitely. And I always forget, there's another one. It used to be called FishMe, but they changed their name. And I apologize because I don't use them that often, but that's another one which is a competitor to KnowBe4. But those would be the ones that where I would start. But the SANS Institute is 100% free. It's a very good program. And if you don't have a budget, I would definitely start there.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Tom. I think we are at the end of our session today. Thanks so much for spending time with us and answering all those questions. If you guys didn't get your questions answered, you can email us at help@virginiasbdc.org. I did put that email in the chat. We also do one-on-one counseling for you guys at your local SBDC. And Tom also does one-on-one counseling as well. So Be sure to email us and you can meet with someone to kind of help you through all of the ins and outs of your cybersecurity for your small business. I did put a link in the chat window for a survey on today's session. We'd really appreciate it if you could fill it out. We will also send it after this with the recording and the PowerPoint in a follow-up email to you guys. You can also find more information about upcoming training sessions throughout the state at virginiaspdc.org. This is the last cybersecurity webinar in our series, but we will have more in the future, so be on the lookout for that. Tom also shares cybersecurity tips weekly on the Virginia SPDC Facebook Live, so be sure to check those out. Also on our website, you can find the Business Recovery webpage, which we developed to help owners continue business operations during this challenging time. These detailed guidelines cover a broad range of critical considerations, ranging from safety and workplace guidance to financial assessments, marketing, and communications. You can use them by themselves, but they were designed to be used in collaboration with a business consultant at your local SPDC. And of course, we have offices located throughout the state to assist you. And thank you so much for attending, everyone, and we hope to see you at our next session. Thank you, Tom.
Thank you, everybody. You all have a great rest of your day.
Bye.